I was on my knees, scrubbing a toilet in a mansion I would one day own. I didn't know that yet. Nobody did. If you had told me that morning, while my hands were raw from bleach and my back was aching from 6 hours of cleaning, that in 1 year I'd be sitting in a boardroom signing papers worth $400 million, I would have laughed in your face. And then probably cried. Because that's how tired I was. So stay with me. Because this story is real. This is my life. And by the end of it, I think you're going to feel something. Maybe you'll see your own struggle in mine. Maybe you'll remember a moment when you almost gave up. I want you to comment and tell me if you did. But first, let me take you back to where it all started. My name doesn't matter right now. Just call me the Maid. That's what I was for 11 years. A maid. A cleaner. Somebody who came in the back door, not the front. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My mom worked 2 jobs. My dad left when I was 7, and I barely remember his face anymore. Just his voice, kind of. Yelling mostly. By the time I was 19, I had a baby girl and no husband. Her father disappeared the way mine did. I guess some things repeat themselves whether you want them to or not. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. When you're a single mom with no degree, no family money, and no safety net, you don't get to dream big. You just try to survive the week. That's it. That's the whole goal. Survive Monday. Survive Tuesday. Get to Friday's paycheck. I cleaned houses because it was the only work I could get with a baby on my hip and no car of my own. I'd take 2 buses just to get to a job that paid me $15 an hour, if I was lucky. Some weeks it was less. Some clients forgot to pay on time. Some acted like I wasn't even in the room, like I was invisible furniture that happened to move around with a mop. You know that feeling, when someone looks right through you? Like you don't exist unless they need something from you? I lived in that feeling for over a decade. I want you to picture something. Imagine scrubbing someone else's bathroom floor, on your hands and knees, while your own daughter is home alone because you couldn't afford a sitter. Imagine hearing your phone buzz and your heart just drops, because you're scared it's the school calling. That was my normal. That was every single day. I'm not saying this to make you feel sad for me. I'm saying it because I need you to understand what came next actually meant something. It wasn't luck falling into an easy life. It was a life that had been broken for so long, finally cracking open into something different. When my daughter was about 9 years old, I got a new client through an agency. A big house. The kind you only see in magazines. Iron gates. A driveway longer than my whole apartment building. The owner was a man named, well, let's just say he was one of the wealthiest men in the state. Self-made. Built his fortune in shipping and real estate over almost 50 years. His wife had passed away a long time before I ever met him. His only son had died in a car accident in his 20s. I didn't know any of this the first day. I just knew I had a new house to clean, and it paid better than my usual clients. He was in his late 70s when I started working there. Quiet man. Sharp eyes. The kind of person who watched everything and said very little. The first few months, he barely spoke to me. I'd clean, I'd leave, I'd get my check. That was the whole relationship. I didn't expect anything different. Rich people don't usually notice the person mopping their floor. I had accepted that a long time ago. But then, one day, everything shifted. Just a little. Just enough. I was cleaning the kitchen, and I heard something crash in the living room. I ran in, and he had fallen. He'd slipped getting up from his chair. He was on the floor, and for a second, I saw something in his eyes I recognized immediately, because I had felt it myself so many times. Fear. Real fear. The fear of being alone and helpless and not knowing if anyone is coming to help you. I didn't think. I just acted. I got him up, got him to the couch, checked if anything was broken, called his doctor, sat with him until his doctor's nurse arrived. I stayed 2 extra hours that day, off the clock, because I wasn't going to leave an old man alone on the floor of his own house. He looked at me afterward and said something I'll never forget. He said, "Nobody's done that for me in 15 years." I didn't know what to say. I just told him that's what people do for each other. That's what you're supposed to do. He got quiet. And then he said, "Not in my world." I didn't understand what he meant at the time. I do now. You'd think after that, things got easier for me. They didn't. Not at first. Life doesn't work like a movie where one good moment fixes everything. A few months after that fall, my daughter got sick. Really sick. Ended up in the hospital for almost 2 weeks. I won't go into all the details, but I will tell you this. When you're a mother sitting next to a hospital bed, watching machines beep, and you don't know if your insurance is going to cover the next test, you learn a kind of fear that never really leaves your body. I missed work. A lot of work. Some of my regular clients dropped me because I wasn't reliable. One woman told me straight to my face, "I need someone I can count on." As if I chose for my daughter to get sick. As if I wasn't sitting in that hospital chair every single night, terrified, exhausted, praying to a God I wasn't even sure was listening anymore. I lost almost all my income in those 2 months. I fell behind on rent. I remember sitting in my car outside the hospital, crying so hard I couldn't even breathe right, because I didn't know how I was going to pay for both my daughter's medicine and our electric bill that month. You might be wondering, what about the old man's house? Didn't that job keep going? Here's the thing. I had to tell him I couldn't come for a while. I fully expected him to replace me. That's what employers do. You become inconvenient, you become replaceable. I had learned that lesson my whole working life. But he didn't replace me. Instead, he had his driver bring groceries to my apartment. No note, no explanation, just groceries left at my door. I didn't even know it was him at first. I thought maybe it was a mistake, or a church program, or something like that. When I finally went back to work, my daughter recovering, thank God, he never mentioned the groceries. I brought it up myself, just to say thank you. And he simply said, "You took care of me when I fell." I don't forget things like that. I remember standing in that kitchen holding a sponge, completely stunned, because in my entire life, almost nobody with money had ever treated me like I mattered. And here was one of the richest men I'd ever met, treating a simple act of kindness like it was the most important thing in the world. I want you to sit with that for a second. Because I think we live in a world that tells us kindness doesn't pay off. That being good to people is naive. That looking out for others while you're struggling yourself is a waste of energy. I am telling you, from my own life, that is not true. Keep that in mind. It matters later. I worked for him for almost 8 more years after that. Our relationship changed slowly. He started asking about my daughter by name. He'd ask how school was going. Sometimes, if I came in stressed, he'd notice before I said a word. One time, I came in after a rough week. My car had broken down, and I'd had to walk almost 2 miles to catch the bus to get to his house. I was late, sweaty, embarrassed, ready for him to be upset. Instead, he asked me to sit down. Just sit, at his kitchen table, like an equal. He asked me what was wrong. I told him about the car. He didn't say much. But 2 days later, there was a mechanic at my apartment complex fixing my car, already paid for. I cried in front of him for the first time that week. Not because of the car. Because somebody, for once in my adult life, was paying attention to me. Really paying attention. Not because I was useful. Because I mattered to him as a person. He started telling me stories about his life. About his son, who he lost. About his wife, who passed from cancer when he was 61. About how he built his company from a single delivery truck in the 60s into an empire that spanned real estate, shipping, and half a dozen other industries by the time I met him. He told me something once that stuck with me forever. He said, "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and almost nobody in my life actually likes me. They like what I can give them. I remember asking him, "Do you think I like you for what you can give me?" He looked at me for a long time. And he said, "No. You're the only one who doesn't." That conversation changed something between us. We weren't employer and maid anymore, not really. We were two people who had both been through hard things, sitting at the same table, finally being honest with each other. When I was 39, and he was 85, his health started really declining. Heart problems. A stroke that took away some of his mobility. I started spending more time at the house, not just cleaning, but helping him. Making sure he ate. Making sure he took his medication. Sitting with him in the evenings when the house got quiet and lonely. His extended family, nieces, nephews, distant cousins, started showing up more during this time. I noticed something about them almost immediately. They didn't visit to check on him. They visited to check on his will. I heard them talking in the hallway once, thinking I couldn't hear. One of his nephews said, "The old man's not going to last much longer. We need to make sure the lawyers have everything lined up." Not, "I hope he's okay." Not, "I miss him." Just, the estate. The money. The empire. I never said anything about it to him directly. It wasn't my place. But he wasn't blind. He saw it too. He told me one night very quietly, "They've been waiting for me to die since before my wife passed. I used to think it would hurt less as I got older. It doesn't." I told him I was sorry. He said, "Don't be sorry. Just don't ever become like them." I promised him I wouldn't. I meant it with everything in me. A few months later, he had a second stroke. This one was worse. He was in the hospital for almost 3 weeks. I visited him every single day after my shifts elsewhere, sometimes staying late into the night, holding his hand, talking to him even when he couldn't really respond. His family visited maybe 4 times total. I counted. I'm not proud that I counted, but grief does strange things to your mind, and counting felt like the only thing I had control over. He passed away on a Tuesday morning in early spring. I was there. Not his nephews, not his nieces. Me. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath. I want to pause here, because I know this is heavy. If you're watching this and you've lost someone you loved, someone who maybe wasn't even blood but felt like family, I see you. This part isn't easy for me to say out loud even now. But I promised myself I'd tell this story honestly, so I'm not going to skip it. 2 weeks after the funeral, the family lawyer called everyone together. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was told to come only to sign some final paperwork related to my employment, severance, they said. I figured that was it. I figured I'd get maybe a month's pay and a polite goodbye, and that would be the end of the strangest, most meaningful working relationship of my life. I sat in the back of that big office, in a chair that wasn't meant for me, surrounded by people in expensive suits who had barely looked at me in 8 years except to ask me to refill a drink or clean up after a family dinner. The lawyer started reading through the will. Small gifts to distant cousins. A donation to a hospital. A trust for a family foundation. The nephews and nieces nodded along, clearly expecting the big numbers to come to them. And then the lawyer said my name. I remember the room going completely silent. I remember thinking maybe I'd misheard. Maybe there was another person with a similar name. But no. It was me. He had left me the majority of his estate. His shipping company. His real estate holdings. His personal properties, including the very house I used to clean on my hands and knees. Investments. Everything, minus a portion set aside for the hospital donation and a small trust for a couple of long-time loyal employees, like his driver and his long-time accountant. The total, once everything was calculated over the following months, came out to just over $400 million. I want you to understand, I did not go into that room expecting anything. I want to be very clear about that, because I know how this sounds. It sounds like a fairy tale, like I must have somehow schemed for this. I did not. I genuinely, 100%, walked into that office thinking I was getting a goodbye handshake and a small severance check. The room exploded into chaos. One of the nephews stood up and started shouting that this had to be a mistake, that I had manipulated an old, sick man, that they would contest the will immediately. I sat there frozen. Completely frozen. My hands were shaking. I remember looking down at them, the same hands that had scrubbed that man's floors for 11 years, and thinking, this cannot be real. I'm not going to pretend the aftermath was easy or glamorous. It was one of the hardest periods of my entire life, and that's saying a lot, considering everything I'd already been through. The family did contest the will. For almost a year, I was dragged through depositions, interviews, accusations. Newspapers picked up the story. Maid inherits billionaire's fortune, and turned it into a spectacle. People online called me horrible things. Said I must have seduced him. Said I was a con artist. Said I deserved nothing. You have no idea what it feels like to grieve someone you genuinely loved, while also being accused of murdering them for money, essentially, in the court of public opinion. I lost sleep. I lost weight. There were nights I sat on my bathroom floor and cried so hard I couldn't breathe, wondering if any of this was even worth it. My daughter, who was 17 by then, had to watch her mother be dragged through the mud on the internet and on local news. Kids at her school said cruel things to her. That part broke me more than anything said about me directly. I could take insults about myself. I could not take my daughter suffering for something she had nothing to do with. There were nights I genuinely considered walking away from all of it. Just signing something, taking a small settlement, and disappearing back into my old life, just to make the attacks stop. But then I remembered something he told me, near the very end, when he could barely speak above a whisper. He said, "Don't let them take what I gave you out of spite. You earned something they never understood how to earn. Kindness that wasn't for sale." I held on to that. Every single day of that ugly legal battle, I held on to those words. Eventually, after depositions, after handwriting analysis on the will, after psychiatric evaluations proving he was of completely sound mind when he wrote it, after his own longtime doctor and lawyer testified to his clarity and intention, the court ruled in my favor. The will stood. Every part of it. I want to be honest with you about something. Inheriting that kind of money did not fix my life the way I thought it might have, back when I was struggling to pay for groceries. Money didn't erase the years of exhaustion. It didn't erase the nights I cried on that bathroom floor, worried about rent. It didn't erase watching my daughter go without things other kids had. What it did do, and this took me a long time to understand, is it gave me the power to make sure nobody in my family ever has to feel that particular kind of fear again. I kept the company running. I brought in real leadership, people who actually knew the industry, and I learned everything I could alongside them. I didn't want to just sit back and collect checks. I wanted to understand what I now had responsibility over. I started a foundation in his name, focused on something very specific: support for working single parents, emergency funds for medical bills, childcare grants, job training programs. Because I know, better than almost anyone, what it feels like to be one bad week away from losing everything. I still remember the exact feeling of being invisible, of being looked through instead of looked at. And I promised myself that foundation would make sure other people, other maids, other cleaners, other exhausted single parents, would be seen. I didn't become someone different because of the money. If anything, the money just gave the person I already was more room to actually help people the way I always wanted to but never had the means to. You might be wondering why I'm telling you all of this now years later. Here's why. I don't think this story is really about money. I think it's about how we treat people when we think nobody's watching, and when we think there's nothing to gain from it. I helped that old man off the floor that day not because I knew who he was or what he had. I helped him because he was a human being in pain, and that's what you do for people. Full stop. I never expected anything in return. That's the whole point. The moment you start being kind to people because you're hoping for a reward, it stops being kindness. It becomes a transaction. And people can feel the difference, even if they can't always explain it. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: you never know which small moment of decency is going to matter the most. You never know which person you help today might be the one who remembers you tomorrow, in ways big or small. Maybe not with $400 million. Probably not, honestly. My story is rare, and I know that. But maybe with a job recommendation. Maybe with a kind word when you need it most. Maybe just with the simple dignity of being remembered as someone who mattered. I also want you to know something else. If you're out there right now struggling, working a job that makes you feel invisible, raising kids alone, wondering if anyone even sees how hard you're trying, I see you. I was you. For 11 years, I was exactly you. I'm not saying wait around for a miracle inheritance. That's not realistic, and I'd be lying if I told you to expect that. What I am saying is this: don't let the hard years turn you bitter. Don't let being overlooked make you stop being kind. The version of me that scrubbed toilets for $15 an hour and the version of me that now runs a foundation helping thousands of families, we're the same person. Same heart. Same values. The money didn't change who I was. It just gave me a bigger table to share it from. Every single day, I think about that man. Not because of what he left me, but because of what he taught me. That even the loneliest, richest man in the world just wanted someone to see him as a person. And that lesson applies to every single one of us, rich or poor, from a mansion or a one-bedroom apartment with a leaking faucet. See people. Really see them. You never know what it might mean to someone who feels invisible. If this story moved you even a little, I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment below and tell me about a moment when someone showed you unexpected kindness, or a moment when you showed kindness to someone else, expecting nothing back. I read every single comment. I want to hear your story too. And if you believe that stories like this, real, raw, human stories, deserve to be told, hit subscribe. There are more stories coming. Stories about struggle, about turning points, about the moments that quietly change everything. Because sometimes, the person nobody notices is the one who ends up changing everything. Thank you for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next one.